Welcome to our brand new show, Talk2Tan. I'm joined here by Ailbhe Smyth, long-time campaigner, feminist, coordinator, Together for Yes. You've done it all. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm delighted. In fact, I'm a co-director. There are three of us.
Co-director, I apologize.
Yeah, no, not at all. There are three of us, the triumvirate or the trinity or whatever.
The trinity of feminism.
Pretty well, actually, yes. Orla O'Connor, who's she's head of the National Women's Council of Ireland, and Gráinne Griffin, who has been, in fact, one of the founder members of ARC, the Abortion Rights Campaign. So when our three organisations came together to set up, or we felt really that some of us somewhere had to take this issue and say, look, we have a referendum coming in, 3 months' time, we hope, or 4 months' time, whatever it was. We need to give some leadership here. We need to get out there, and who better to do it than a bunch of women? So here we are.
Absolutely, definitely.
Here we are, just a little over 2 weeks away from.
Yeah, it's really
from
creeping
D-Day.
up now.
Yeah,
I remember it was about a year ago, and now it's 2 weeks ago. We're rushing to get people registered. How are you finding the campaign so far? Do you think it's intensifying now, seeing as we're getting so close?
Totally. If I think back to, say, a month ago, when we thought working incredibly hard, and we were working 7 days a week, but now it's 24 hours every day, 7 days
it's
a week.
Full-time job nearly.
Oh, it is completely and entirely. And I'll go back to aspects of the campaign, but just when I think of it there, one of the incredible things working on this campaign is the number of people who've come in to volunteer and who've done things like, they've taken leave from their jobs, they're taking extended holidays. Some people are actually saying to their employers, I just want to do 3 days a week now, I'm doing 2 days on the campaign, and they're taking reduced pay, or they're taking additional holidays. It touches my heart, it really does, because these are people who are really, really, really committed, and all over Ireland it's the same kind of story.
They're coming in droves, especially after the referendum was announced. There was hundreds of people signing up to get involved in local campaigns and political parties and whatever was offering a platform for repeal. You also fought on the Yes Equality campaign. Have you found different tactics or a big difference in the two campaigns?
Well, we learnt a lot from that campaign. It was absolutely a fantastic campaign, and there are lots of ways of doing things that have been, there's been great learning from that, but they look as if they might be a bit connected, but they're really very different.
I find this is a little bit more vicious in
It's always
ways,
been very
because
different.
there's so many different, I suppose, stories or excuses, as people like to say, that you might need an abortion or need access to an abortion. And I think I've been canvassing too, and I suppose on the doors people kind of want to justify a reason where it's acceptable to have an abortion. How have you been finding the canvassing and campaigning?
Well, I'm basically in headquarters doing a lot of front of.
Are you not doing doors much?
Not so much, although I'd really like to be, but I'm obviously hearing about all the time about what goes on the canvas. And you see, I actually think, from what I'm hearing, people know and understand that there is a problem. They get that. And they really therefore want that Eighth Amendment to be taken out of the Constitution, because that is what's stopping services, laws first of all, I suppose, and services being put in place that mean that women could be properly taken care of, properly looked after. And I mean taken care of not at all in any condescending way towards women, but when we have a difficult situation in our lives, when we go to a doctor or a hospital, we want to be taken care of. We want to be minded. So it's a bit like sort of minding women. And I think that people do understand that, and they really want to do it. And that it's up to us to say, this is something that we can do, because we do have that sense of kindness and generosity in ourselves and compassion. And I think even just quite simply being kind, just understanding that another woman's predicament and dilemma may not be something, what she does may not be what you would do, but that you recognise and you feel that you why would you be standing in her way? Why would you stop her from doing what's important and what she believes is best for her, is right for her in her life at that particular moment in time?
I've come across a lot of undecided people that, as you said, they do agree that we need to remove it. It's not acceptable. It shouldn't have been put in there. But they also struggle with the idea that maybe we can amend it or change it or liberalise the law, but still protect it. What do you tell those people?
Well, first of all, I mean, I say quite simply, we can't actually do anything more than we have already done with the present law, which is the protection of life.
It needs to go.
During pregnancy. And that only protects a woman's life. That is the only reason for which you can have an abortion. So, you have to say to people, one way and another, if you want change, if we want change, if you want change, if we all want change, the Eighth Amendment has to be removed. And it is only at that point then that we could put in place laws, and always remember proper health service provision, that would mean that women could have the kind of care they need here. Abortion is always something, it's a need, and it is a need which is met within healthcare services. So it really is a health need for women. And we can do nothing about that, whether it's for fatal fetal anomaly, whether it's for women who have been raped, very sadly, and who find that they're pregnant after that rape. The only way we can actually do this is to say to those women, we are going to remove this from the Constitution and put laws in place that will mean that you as a woman with the fatal fetal anomaly diagnosis, that you as a woman who has been appallingly has become pregnant after a rape, that if you want to have an abortion, that you can have. The only way to ensure that women's health will be protected during pregnancy is to remove the Eighth Amendment. And I often find an awful lot of people don't realise that.
Yeah, but it's good to clear it up. As well in
it's
England...
more than clearing it up, it's about saying, actually, when you think about it, for young women like yourself, that in 2018, it is, if you were pregnant, to find yourself pregnant,
there's no choice
and your
but
health,
to be pregnant,
and that your health was being impacted negatively by that pregnancy, if you're going to become more ill, that you would not be able to have an abortion in this country. If and this happens more often, I think, than people realise. If you have cancer and you become pregnant, depending on the kind of cancer that you have, it is quite possible and even likely that a doctor will say to you, no, we can't actually provide you with the cancer treatment that you need because there's a risk of damaging the baby that you're carrying, or the fetus, whatever you want to call it. And that danger is there. So that woman and her partner, her family, whatever, are thinking her health is not protected. I mean, again, I think in 2018 that's astonishing.
It is,
to a lot of very young people who say, oh, I didn't know that. I thought the Protection of Life During Pregnancy Act looked after that. It doesn't. It only protects a woman's life. And doctors say, you say, okay, if there is a real and substantial risk to a woman's life, then we can perform an abortion, we can end that pregnancy. But doctors say, but it's not an exact moment when you can say, this is where a woman's health is impacted, this is where her life is at risk. It's a continuum, so that a woman becomes more ill and more ill, which was exactly what happened in the case of Savita Halappanavar.
Yeah, and we find as well people want to know the exact moment life begins, but we can't tell the exact moment that life is at risk. So
exactly. Well, that's a really interesting point. And I mean, I don't. Sometimes, if you're on my side, on the yes side, people assume that you don't think that life begins at conception. Actually, I do think it begins at conception. I do. There are very many different views on it, both theological and scientific. It's not a major... I don't argue about it. For me, I think that prenatal life is there. I think prenatal life has a value. But what is very wrong in our situation is that the Eighth Amendment says, effectively says fetus and woman have exactly the same value, so that if a woman is unwell and the treatment would impact on the fetus, the doctor has to say, sorry, we can't actually do that. We can't carry out that treatment. And that is supposedly giving equal value. But we have to be very honest with ourselves and say, do we really think that a woman's life has, in effect, lesser value than that of a fetus? And I don't think we do think that. I don't think people really think that. You know, if you say very often to people, well, suppose it was your daughter, or if it's your partner or your wife, or it's your sister, do you really think that her life is in fact has a lesser value, and that her life should be subordinate to, should be secondary to fetal life, and that could mean the death or the ill health of that woman? And most people, when they're confronted with that, they say, well, no, I don't actually think that. And yet it's not true to say that we don't value that life, that prenatal life. We do, but we have to weigh things up and put them in the balance. So you have there the woman with her life, her family life, her job, her community, her friends, her hopes and her dreams, and we're saying nothing. That simply doesn't count. That is of no moment. So that living, breathing woman, me, when I was of childbearing age, that our lives are effectively of lesser value. I don't think we really think that.
No, I don't think we do either. I think everybody values life. Sometimes it's a bit extreme to the extent that they do. I think I've heard people, discuss with me, continuing a pregnancy to the end and then just put your baby up for adoption. So, I mean, do you think that, I find I struggle with that myself, to force a woman to abandon her child, and then the child will obviously at one point discover, you're not my biological mother, and all that goes with that, overtaking a pill.
Well, I think that's a very callous attitude to have, because it assumes that bearing a child for, giving birth to a baby, giving birth to a child, that somehow is almost nothing, that you can then say...
You can distance yourself from your fetus.
Exactly, emotionally and in every way. And I think that's a very callous thing to say, I really do. I also think it comes from a different age. It's almost as if it comes from another era. I often think that, by the way, about this debate. I mean, back in 1983, it was like we were kind of living in a different country. And hugely, hugely, hugely different. And those kinds of very tough, ruthless attitudes.
But I've come across it even amongst young girls. People. And that, I suppose to a certain degree I expect it from an older generation and, to be stereotypical. But it does shock me in particular when I would engage with a teenager, they're obviously, most of them are sexually active and stuff, so I would always engage in talking with them about it, and they seem to have this blasé attitude of, well, just give it away, but yet they condemn this blasé attitude that the pro-choice side have of just getting rid of it.
Yeah, well,
so it kind of contradicts.
But I do think that when you're very young, you probably haven't thought very much about what that relationship is actually, and you haven't also thought about what it's like to be pregnant for 9 months. And there's no reason why you should actually. That's not the age. If you're 14, 15, 16, it's not the age.
But it does happen though, and I come from an area where we do have a lot of single mothers, a lot of teenage pregnancies, underage, unsafe sex, and I know as well when you go to England and you do come home, they give you the follow-up call and how they advise you to go on contraception and get tested, and they have the safe sex talk with you apparently. And do you think that having contraception available to everyone is the key to kind of reducing abortions that we don't want to happen in the first place?
I think one of the really interesting things that's come out of all of this is precisely that we now have calls from politicians, including members of government parties and so on and so forth, saying, look, we should have free contraception. We need much better contraceptive education. We need much better contraceptive information out there. We need much better sex and relationship education in schools. And I think most people who've been to school in this country at any point in time will say, absolutely, please bring it on. Bring it on. And, whatever I think that makes absolute sense, because that's about people's good health, actually, and it's about saying, look, if you're not ready to have children, it's not something that you want, of course you should know about how to protect yourself from unintended pregnancy. Of course you should. So it makes absolute sense to be working with young people and to be ensuring that they do have all of the information they need, and that they also feel comfortable talking about it and thinking about it and being able to say. And that also brings in issues of consent and all kinds of interesting things. And I do look at very young women, girls often who do have very young babies, and I worked myself for a long time with single mums and so on, and thinking, you know, really it is very hard, it is very, very tough. And I think for a lot of those young women who absolutely adore their children and love them to bits, of course, that it is nonetheless really hard. And that what we're saying very simply when we're asking for repeal of the Eighth Amendment is to make sure that women can have the information that they need to make decisions which are going to mean that, you know, what they do in their lives is something really responsible. And I still believe, and I do believe very much, that people want to be responsible as parents. They want to be at a stage in their lives where
to provide for your child.
You do. It may be kind of gulp, oh my God, you know, we're going to have a child, but you still want to do that with the sense that this is something that you've planned, you've thought about. Ideally, that
having a child should be a choice.
It should really be a choice. And we used to say long ago, you know, every child a wanted child, and I think that is important.
Have you anything to say to the undecided voters?
Well, to the undecided voters, I would say, you know, I understand that this can seem like a very difficult decision to make as to how you'll vote in the referendum, but bear in mind that unless we repeal the Eighth Amendment, we won't be able to do anything for women who are pregnant as a result of rape. We won't be able to do anything for women and couples who've had a diagnosis of a fatal fetal anomaly. We won't be able to do anything to protect the health of women in pregnancy. We won't be able to do anything for the, you know, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 women who take the abortion pill every day on their own, well, every year on their own. We won't be able to do anything about the women who will continue to have to travel to England and to other countries. In other words, we will continue to stick our heads in the sand and to ignore a reality which is in this country. Women are having abortions in this country now, and it's really important that we regulate those abortions, because they're not regulated. It's a bit like sort of saying, oh, it's okay, it doesn't matter, we can't see it. But the thing is, now we can see it. It is actually here. And I think it will be profoundly irresponsible of us as a people not to recognise that reality, and out of the honesty and I suppose really the goodness and the generosity of our hearts to say, this may not be my choice for me, but I understand that women make good decisions, and they make decisions which are in the best interests of their own lives and their family lives. And for that reason alone, we really should, at this stage in 2018, remove that awful obstacle for women from the Constitution.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for joining me. It's an absolute privilege. My first episode as well. Thank you.
Well, lovely to talk to you, and good luck with all the other episodes.
We'll see.
And keep canvassing out there now.
Yeah, definitely. Keep at it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for watching, and join us next week when we'll have more guests on Talk2Tan.